The space around Jupiter's moons was quiet. Too quiet. Lieutenant Commander Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the Horizon Explorer, staring at the sensor readings that made no sense. His SEAL team had been sent on this mission 3 weeks ago. Their orders were simple. Investigate the strange energy signals coming from near Europa. Find out if they were natural or something else. Jake was 34 years old, built lean and strong from years of training. His dark hair was cut military short. His eyes were calm and alert, always watching, always calculating. He had been a SEAL for 12 years. In that time, he had completed missions in places most people never heard about. He had skills that took years to learn and a reputation that followed him through every operation. His team was the best. Chief Petty Officer Lisa Grant handled communications and tactics. She could read a battlefield like others read books. Petty Officer Carlos Diaz was their explosives expert, calm under pressure and deadly accurate. Lieutenant Ben Cooper managed their technical operations, understanding systems and computers better than anyone Jake had ever met. The Horizon Explorer was not a warship. It was a research vessel, but it carried enough weapons to handle pirates or debris. The crew of 40 scientists and support staff relied on Jake's team for security. Right now, everyone was nervous. The energy readings had been getting stronger for 2 days. Something big was out there. Jake checked his weapon for the 3rd time that hour. It was an automatic response, something he did without thinking. His instincts were screaming at him. Something was wrong. He had learned to trust those instincts. They had kept him alive when logic said he should be dead. Then the ship shook. Alarms started blaring. The lights on the bridge flickered and turned red. Jake moved to the weapons station without being told. His team was already moving to their positions. They had drilled for this. They were ready. The main view screen showed something impossible. A ship had appeared from nowhere right in front of them. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Horizon Explorer. Its hull was dark metal covered in strange markings that glowed with blue light. The design was like nothing human engineers had ever built. Jake felt his heart rate increase but kept his breathing steady. This was first contact. Humanity had wondered for centuries if they were alone. Now they had their answer. The question was whether this answer would kill them. The captain tried to send communication signals. Nothing worked. The alien ship just sat there silent and menacing. Then their weapon systems went dead. All of them. The lights that showed active weapons turned dark. The Horizon Explorer was defenseless. Lisa spoke quietly next to him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed concern. She had counted at least 50 weapon ports on the alien ship. If they wanted to destroy the Horizon Explorer, they could do it in seconds. Jake nodded. He saw the same thing. This was not going to be a fight they could win with weapons. A beam of light shot from the alien ship and hit their hull. Metal screamed as something cut through it like paper. Jake grabbed his rifle and ran toward the breach point. His team followed. They took positions in the corridor, using walls and doorways for cover. If the aliens were boarding, they would make them pay for every meter. The first alien came through the breach and Jake got his first look at them. They were tall, at least 7 feet. Their bodies were covered in armor that looked like insect shells, dark and shining. They had 4 arms, each one holding a weapon Jake did not recognize. Their faces had mandibles and compound eyes that glowed yellow in the emergency lighting. Jake fired. His bullets hit the alien's armor and bounced off. The alien turned toward him and fired back. Jake rolled behind cover as energy bolts burned the wall where he had been standing. He smelled burning metal and plastic. Their weapons were beyond anything Earth had, but Jake had trained for fighting enemies with better equipment. You did not fight head-on. You used tactics. You used terrain. You made them come to you and you made them pay. He signaled to Carlos, who pulled a flashbang grenade. Ben cut the corridor lights. The aliens had those big compound eyes. Maybe bright light would hurt them. Carlos threw the grenade. The explosion of light and sound filled the corridor. The aliens stumbled, their weapons firing wild. Jake and his team moved fast. They went low, sliding under the alien fire. Lisa took out an alien's knee joint with precise shots. The armor there was thinner. The alien fell. Jake was on it immediately, using a combat knife to find gaps in the armor. The alien was strong, but Jake had leverage and training. He found a gap at the neck and drove the knife home. The alien stopped moving, 1 down, but more were coming through the breach. Many more. They fell back to the next corridor junction. Jake grabbed the fallen alien's weapon. It was heavy, but he figured out the trigger. He fired it back at the advancing aliens. The weapon shot bolts of superheated plasma. Where it hit, metal melted. One alien took a direct hit and went down screaming. They fought for 20 minutes. Jake lost track of time. Everything became action and reaction. Shoot, move, cover, reload, take down another enemy. Protect your team. His body worked on pure training and muscle memory. This was what years of preparation built. The ability to function when most people would freeze. But they were being pushed back. The aliens just kept coming. Jake's team took out 12 of them, but it was not enough. The aliens had numbers and technology. Jake saw his team was getting tired. Carlos had burns on his arm. Lisa was limping. Ben had blood running down his face from a cut. Then something changed in the air. Jake felt it like pressure on his skin. A high-pitched sound started, too high to really hear but felt in his bones. His vision started to blur. His legs went weak. Around him, his team was falling. Jake tried to fight it, but his body would not respond. The neural stun field, he thought distantly. They were not trying to kill them. They were capturing them. Jake hit the floor. His last thought before darkness took him was simple and cold. He would survive this. He would find a way, because that was what he did. That was what his training demanded. That was what made him who he was. When Jake woke up, everything hurt. His head pounded. His muscles felt like they were on fire. He opened his eyes slowly and found himself staring at a ceiling that glowed with soft blue light. He was lying on a hard platform in a small room. The walls were transparent, some kind of force field or advanced material. He could see through them to other rooms just like his. His team was there, each one in their own cell. Lisa saw him wake up and nodded once. She looked tired but alert. Carlos was checking his burns. Ben was studying the walls, probably trying to understand the technology. They were alive. That was good. Alive meant options. Jake stood up carefully. His weapons were gone. His gear was gone. He wore only his basic uniform. He walked to the transparent wall and touched it. It was solid but hummed with energy. He could feel it vibrating under his hand. This was a containment field, probably something that could be adjusted to hold different species. Heavy footsteps approached. 3 aliens came into view, walking down the corridor between the cells. 2 were soldiers, their weapons ready. The 3rd was different. His armor was more decorated, marked with symbols that probably meant rank. This one stopped in front of Jake's cell and stared at him. A device on the alien's armor started speaking. The words came out in accented but understandable English. A translation device. The alien's voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. He introduced himself as Commander Vex of the Krell Dominion. He said humans were primitive. He said their resistance was amusing but pointless. He said they would serve the Krell now or they would die. Jake said nothing. He just looked at Commander Vex with calm, steady eyes. He was gathering information, counting guards, watching patrol patterns, noting the technology, looking for weaknesses, because there were always weaknesses. Every system had them. Every enemy had them. You just had to find them. Commander Vex seemed annoyed by Jake's silence. He moved closer to the cell wall. He said humans would learn their place. He said the Krell had conquered hundreds of species. He said resistance only made things worse. Then he walked away, his soldiers following. Jake watched them go. Then he looked at his team. Lisa was watching him. She knew that look. Carlos and Ben knew it too. It was the look Jake got when he was planning something, when he was taking an impossible situation and finding a way through it. They had seen it before in missions that should have failed but did not. Jake sat back down on the platform. He closed his eyes and started to think. The aliens had made a mistake. They thought they had captured simple soldiers. They thought technology and strength were everything. But Jake had spent his life learning that battles were not won by the strongest. They were won by the smartest, by the ones who refused to quit, by the ones who adapted and survived. The Krell did not know it yet, but they had not captured prey. They had captured a predator who had earned a different name in the shadows of classified operations, a name that enemy combatants whispered before they died, a name that meant something in the world of special operations. They had captured the Reaper, and the Reaper always found a way. 3 days passed in the cells. Jake used every hour to learn. He watched the guards change shifts every 8 hours. He counted their numbers. He noticed that the younger guards were nervous around the human prisoners. The older ones were confident, almost bored. That told Jake something important. The Krell thought they had already won. On the fourth day, Commander Vex returned. This time he brought others with him. Krell in different uniforms, not soldiers but something else. Scientists maybe, or administrators. They stood outside the cells and talked among themselves. Their translator devices picked up some of it. They were discussing entertainment. Something about proving human weakness. Commander Vex turned to face Jake's cell. He smiled, which looked terrifying with his mandibles. He explained that the Krell military had traditions. When they captured enemy warriors, they tested them. They brought them to the arena. If the warriors were strong and provided good entertainment, they earned better treatment. If they were weak, they died quickly and were forgotten. The humans would fight in the arena. They would face creatures and champions from other conquered worlds. If they survived 10 matches, they would be granted status as servants instead of prisoners. Vex said this like he was being generous. Like slavery was a reward. Jake still said nothing. He looked at Vex with those calm eyes. Inside, his mind was racing. An arena meant rules. Rules meant patterns. Patterns could be exploited. This might be the opportunity he needed. 2 hours later, guards came for Carlos. They opened his cell using some kind of remote control and pulled him out roughly. Carlos did not fight. He looked at Jake as they took him away. Jake nodded once. Trust your training. Stay alert. Survive. The cells had screens that showed the arena. Jake and the rest of the team watched as Carlos was pushed into a huge circular space. The floor was dark metal. The walls rose up 50 feet to seating areas filled with Krell soldiers. There were thousands of them, all watching, all waiting for blood sport. Carlos stood in the center of the arena. He wore only his basic uniform. No weapons, no armor. He turned slowly, checking his surroundings. Jake felt pride watching him. Carlos was scared, anyone would be, but he was not panicking. He was thinking. A gate opened on the far side of the arena. Something big came through. The creature was massive, the size of a small car. It had 6 legs ending in claws. Its body was covered in bony plates that looked like natural armor. Blades grew from its limbs, sharp and deadly. The Krell called it a razorback. It was a predator from a world with 3 times Earth's gravity. The crowd roared. They expected this to be quick. A human with no weapons against an armored predator. Easy entertainment, the razorback charged. It moved fast despite its size. Carlos ran. Not away from it, but to the side, toward one of the pillars that supported the arena seating. The creature followed, its claws tearing gouges in the metal floor. Carlos reached the pillar and dodged behind it at the last second. The razorback could not turn fast enough. It slammed into the pillar with a sound like thunder. The impact stunned it. Carlos did not wait. He jumped onto its back, avoiding the blade limbs, and started hitting weak points, the gaps between armor plates. The joints where legs met body. The creature roared and thrashed. It tried to shake Carlos off. But Carlos held on like he was riding a bull. He kept hitting the same spots over and over. Biology was biology. Enough damage to joints would slow anything down. The fight lasted 20 minutes. Carlos used every trick he knew. He made the creature chase him until it was tired. He used the arena's pillars and barriers to limit its movement. He waited for it to make mistakes. And when it was exhausted and bleeding from a dozen wounds, Carlos found an opening. A gap in the armor at the neck. He drove his fingers into it and did not let go until the creature stopped moving. The arena went silent. Carlos stood over the dead razorback, breathing hard, covered in the creature's blood. He looked up at the crowd. The Krell were not cheering. They were staring in shock. This was not supposed to happen. The human was supposed to die quickly. In his cell, Jake allowed himself a small smile. That was one. Carlos had shown them something important. Humans did not give up. They adapted. They won over the next 2 days. More members of Jake's team fought in the arena. Lisa went second. They gave her 3 Krell warriors armed with practice weapons. The Krell expected their trained soldiers to beat an unarmed human female easily. Lisa moved like water. She was small compared to the Krell, but that was an advantage. She went low when they expected high. She was fast when they expected strength. She used their own momentum against them. One Krell swung his weapon and missed. Lisa was already behind him, striking pressure points that worked across species, neural clusters, joint locks. She did not try to match their strength. She used technique. When she took down the third warrior, the crowd was not silent anymore. They were murmuring, worried. These humans were not behaving like prey. They were behaving like predators. Ben fought next. They put him against a combat drone, a machine designed to train Krell soldiers. It had weapons, armor, and programming that made it deadly. But Ben understood machines. He spent the first 5 minutes just watching it, learning its patterns. Then he started to fight. He led the drone into situations where its programming worked against it. He made it choose between targets that did not exist. He exploited the delay between its sensors and its actions. And when he found a gap in its defensive routines, he took it apart piece by piece. The Krell started to understand something was very wrong. These humans were winning. Not by accident. Not by luck, by skill, by training. By refusing to quit even when the odds said they should. Commander Vex was furious. Jake could see it in how he moved, how he barked orders at his subordinates. This was not going according to plan. The humans were supposed to break. They were supposed to show fear. Instead, they were showing the entire Krell military that their technology and strength were not enough. Vex came to Jake's cell on the third night. He was alone this time, no guards. He stared at Jake through the transparent wall. He asked a question. What kind of soldiers were they? What kind of training did humans have that made them fight like this? Jake finally spoke. His voice was calm and quiet. He said they were nothing special. Just soldiers doing their job. But his eyes told a different story. His eyes said that humans learned to fight on a world that tried to kill them every day. They learned to survive when survival seemed impossible. They learned that giving up meant death, so they never gave up. Vex did not like that answer. He left without saying more, but Jake saw something in the commander's eyes. Doubt, maybe even fear. The Krell were starting to realize they had made a mistake. The next morning, Jake heard Krell guards talking outside his cell. They did not know he could hear them. Or maybe they did not care. They were discussing the humans. One guard said his unit leader had checked Earth's classification in the Krell database. Earth was listed as a Class 12 hazard world. That was the second highest danger rating. Only worlds that killed most species within days got that classification. The other guard said that explained everything. Humans evolved on a death world. High gravity, extreme weather, dangerous animals, diseases that would kill most species. Humans survived all of that. They were built to survive. That was why they fought so hard. It was in their nature. Then one guard said something that made Jake pay closer attention. The Krell Intelligence Division had gotten access to Earth's military databases during the capture. Most files were heavily encrypted. But they found something. Records of special operations, elite soldiers who did impossible missions, and one name kept appearing, a call sign used by enemy combatants, a name that showed up in operation after operation. The guard tried to pronounce it. His translator struggled with the word. Reaper. The intelligence officer who saw the files had sent a warning to Commander Vex. Be careful with these humans. One of them might be the operator called Reaper. The file said he had completed 73 missions with a 0 failure rate. The file said enemy forces feared him. The file said he was the most dangerous human they had captured. The guards moved away. Jake sat quietly in his cell. So they knew, or at least they suspected, that would change things. He was not sure if it would help or hurt, but information was power, and now he knew what they knew. That afternoon, Commander Vex made an announcement over the ship's communication system. The entire Krell fleet could hear it. He said the humans had proven themselves capable fighters. But capability was not enough. To truly test their worth, the leader of the human prisoners would face the arena champion, Kragor the Breaker. 300 victories, 0 defeats, the greatest warrior in Krell history. Vex said if the human leader survived, one member of his team would be released back to Earth. If the human leader failed, all the humans would be executed as examples. It was meant to be generous, a chance at mercy. But Jake heard what Vex really meant. The commander wanted to break him. To show that human skill and determination meant nothing against true Krell power. Lisa caught his eye from her cell. She looked worried. Carlos and Ben looked the same. They knew what Kragor the Breaker meant. They had heard the guards talking about him. He was not just a fighter. He was a killer. He enjoyed causing pain. The guards came for Jake at dawn. They opened his cell and pulled him out roughly. He did not resist. He walked between them with his head up and his eyes calm. They took him through corridors filled with Krell soldiers. All of them stopped to watch him pass. Word had spread through the fleet. The human leader was going to face Kragor. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. They brought him to a preparation room next to the arena. Through the walls, Jake could hear the crowd. Thousands of voices. The arena was packed. This was not just entertainment anymore. This was a statement. The Krell wanted to prove that their strength was supreme, that humans, no matter how skilled, could not stand against true warriors. A Krell medical officer examined Jake, checking that he was healthy enough to fight. Jake submitted to it without complaint. He used the time to control his breathing, to center himself. This was no different than any other mission. Assess the situation, identify the objective, execute the plan. Stay alive, the medical officer spoke. He said Jake's heart rate was too slow. Most species about to fight Kragor had racing hearts, flooded with fear hormones. But Jake's vitals were almost calm. The officer seemed disturbed by this. He asked if Jake understood what was about to happen, if he knew who Kragor was. Jake looked at him and spoke quietly. He said he understood perfectly. He was going to fight someone who had never lost, someone who was bigger, stronger, and better armed, someone who had killed hundreds of opponents. The medical officer nodded, relieved that Jake grasped the situation. Then Jake smiled slightly and said one more thing. None of that mattered. He had faced impossible odds before. This was just another day. The medical officer backed away, unsettled. There was something wrong with this human. Something that did not fit what Krell understood about prey species. This human should be terrified. Instead, he was calm, ready, almost eager. The gate to the arena opened. The roar of the crowd washed over Jake like a physical force. He walked out into the light. The arena floor was huge, maybe 200 feet across. The walls rose up on all sides to seating that was completely filled. Every Krell on the ship was here. Some had even come from other ships in the fleet. This was history. They wanted to watch it happen. Jake turned slowly, taking it all in. The crowd, the layout, the lighting, everything. Then he looked up at the command box where Commander Vex sat with his senior officers. Vex was watching him with satisfaction. This was his moment, the moment he broke the human spirit. A gate on the opposite side opened. Kragor emerged and the crowd went wild. He was massive even for a Krell, 8 feet tall and built like a tank. His forearms were thick with muscle. He wore battle armor decorated with marks for each of his victories. In his hands he carried plasma blades, weapons that could cut through steel like paper. Kragor walked to the center of the arena and stopped. He looked at Jake and laughed. The sound was cruel and mocking. Through the arena speakers, his translator device spoke. He said the human was small, weak, soft. He would break easily. Kragor promised to make it last, to give the crowd a good show. To make Jake scream before the end, Jake said nothing. He just watched Kragor with those calm, calculating eyes. He was measuring distances, watching how Kragor moved, looking for tells, for patterns. Every fighter had them, habits built from years of winning, weaknesses hidden behind overwhelming strength. A horn sounded. The match had begun. Kragor charged immediately, plasma blades burning the air. He was fast for something so big, but Jake was faster. He moved like smoke, sliding to the side at the last possible second. Kragor's blades cut air where Jake had been standing. Kragor spun and attacked again, a flurry of strikes that would have killed most opponents instantly. But Jake was not most opponents. He had trained for this his entire adult life. His body moved before his mind consciously decided. Dodge, duck, roll. Never in the same pattern, never predictable. The crowd started to murmur. This was not how it was supposed to go. The human should be dead already. Instead, he was dancing around Kragor untouched, making the champion look slow. Kragor roared in frustration. He attacked harder, faster, more aggressive. And that was what Jake wanted. Angry fighters made mistakes. They left openings. They stopped thinking and just reacted. Jake waited for his moment. It came when Kragor overextended on a swing. His weight shifted forward too far. Jake moved in close, inside the reach of the plasma blades. He struck at the exposed joint of Kragor's knee with a precise kick. The armor protected against cuts and energy weapons. It was less effective against blunt force trauma delivered at exactly the right angle. Cragor stumbled. Jake did not give him time to recover. He hit pressure points on one of Cragor's arms. The arm went weak for a moment, long enough for Jake to grab the wrist and twist, using leverage instead of strength. The plasma blade fell from Cragor's grip. The crowd was silent now. Shocked, Cragor had dropped a weapon. That never happened. The champion swung with his other 3 arms, wild and desperate. One blade caught Jake's shoulder, burning through his uniform and searing flesh. The pain was intense, but Jake pushed it aside. Pain was information. It told him he was still alive. Still fighting, Jake grabbed the fallen plasma blade. It was heavy and designed for Krell hands, but he adapted his grip. Now he had a weapon. Now the fight was different. Cragor backed up, reassessing. This human was not like other opponents. This human knew how to fight. They circled each other. Cragor was breathing hard now, his armor scorched in places from his own wild swings. Jake was hurt, blood running down his arm, but his eyes were focused. Clear. He was in that zone that only came in real combat, where time seemed to slow down and everything became simple. Cragor activated his armor's energy shield, a defensive measure he had never needed before in 300 battles. The shield shimmered around him, protecting against energy weapons and fast projectiles. He thought this would end it. The human could not hurt him now, but Jake had read the technical briefings on Krell technology during his mission preparation. Energy shields had limitations. They were optimized for stopping fast-moving objects. They were much less effective against sustained pressure, against something moving slowly and deliberately through the field. Jake dropped the plasma blade. Cragor laughed, thinking the human had given up. But Jake was not giving up. He was adapting. He rushed forward and grabbed Cragor's arm. The shield resisted, but Jake pushed through it slowly, using constant pressure. Once inside the shield's optimal range, he was close enough that the shield could not stop him. Jake struck the same knee he had hit before. Once, twice, 3 times. The joint gave way with a crack that echoed through the silent arena. Cragor fell to one knee. Jake did not stop. He struck nerve clusters, pressure points, vulnerable spots that existed in most species with similar biology. Cragor tried to fight back, but his movements were slower now, weaker. He was injured and confused. How was this possible? How could a small, unarmed human hurt him? He was Cragor the Breaker. He was unstoppable. But Jake was showing him something important. Size did not matter when you knew where to hit. Strength did not matter when you had technique. Armor did not matter when you understood anatomy. This was what human special forces learned. This was what made them dangerous: knowledge, training, the absolute refusal to quit. Jake swept Cragor's good leg and the champion fell completely. His energy shield flickered and died, overloaded from too much use. Jake picked up one of the plasma blades. He stood over Cragor, the blade at the fallen warrior's throat. The arena was completely silent. No one could believe what they were seeing. Jake looked up at Commander Vex in the command box. His voice carried in the silence. He said his terms clearly. "Release my people, all of them. Give us a ship and safe passage back to Earth. Do this now or learn what happens when you push a human too far." Vex stood up, his face twisted with rage. This was not how it was supposed to end. He reached for the control panel to summon his guards, to order them to kill all the humans immediately, but he never got the chance. The young guard who had warned Jake was stationed in the detention area. When he saw what happened in the arena, he made a choice. He unlocked all the human cells. Lisa, Carlos, and Ben were ready. They had been watching through the screens. They knew this was their moment. The SEAL team moved fast. They took weapons from surprised guards. They used Krell technology against the Krell. Lisa secured the detention area. Carlos moved toward the engine room. Ben headed for communications. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they were doing what they did best: operating behind enemy lines, adapting, surviving. Other guards saw what was happening and hesitated. They had watched the humans fight. They had seen what Jake did to Cragor. Some of them were starting to question. Was it right to keep warriors like this as prisoners? Was it honorable to force them to fight for entertainment? The young guard spoke to his unit. He said they had a choice. They could follow orders and try to stop the humans. Many would die, or they could do something different. They could choose honor over blind obedience. They could help these warriors who fought with such courage, One by one, guards started to lower their weapons. Not all of them. Some remained loyal to Commander Vex, but enough changed sides that a rebellion was starting. The standoff lasted 3 hours. Jake's team held key positions throughout the ship. They had not hurt anyone who did not attack them first. They were not trying to take over the ship. They were just making it clear that they would not be prisoners anymore. They would not be slaves. They would not be entertainment. Jake sat in the arena, still bleeding from his fight with Kragor. The Krell medical officer had approached carefully and asked if he could treat the wounds. Jake had nodded. The officer worked quickly, using alien technology that sealed the burn on Jake's shoulder. It hurt, but Jake did not flinch. The officer seemed impressed by this. While the officer worked, Krell soldiers filled the arena. Not attacking, just watching, waiting. They looked at Jake with new eyes. This small human had done something impossible. He had defeated their champion. He had turned a hopeless situation into a rebellion. Some of the soldiers were angry, but many looked thoughtful, respectful. A communication came through the arena speakers. The voice belonged to the officer who had taken command from Vex. He said the Krell High Command wanted to speak with the human leader. A diplomatic channel was being opened. Jake would speak directly to the rulers of the Krell Dominion. Jake stood up. He looked around the arena one more time, at the thousands of alien soldiers watching him, at Kragor, who gave him a small nod of acknowledgement, at the young guard who had started this by unlocking the cells. Then Jake walked toward the command deck. 2 rebel guards escorted him, not as a prisoner, as a guest. The command deck was large and filled with technology Jake barely understood. Holographic displays showed star systems and fleet positions. Officers worked at stations that controlled weapons and navigation. Commander Vex was there, sitting under guard, his face dark with humiliation. The second in command, whose name was Theron, stood at the center console. Theron looked at Jake. He said the High Command was ready. Jake should know that what he said in the next few minutes would determine the fate of his species. If he threatened the Krell, they would destroy Earth. If he begged for mercy, they would enslave humanity. He needed to find another path. Jake understood. This was the most important mission briefing of his life. He had to negotiate with an alien empire that could crush Earth. He had to do it while standing on their ship, surrounded by their soldiers, with his team holding hostages. He had to turn enemies into allies. It seemed impossible. But Jake had built a career on doing the impossible. The holographic display activated. 3 Krell appeared, larger than life. They wore elaborate armor marked with symbols of rank and authority. These were the supreme commanders of the Krell Dominion. They had ruled for decades. They had conquered dozens of species. They looked at Jake like he was an insect. The center commander spoke. His voice was cold and formal. He said Jake had created a difficult situation. Krell soldiers had been injured. Krell authority had been challenged. This could not stand. However, he had reviewed the reports. Commander Vex had violated protocols. The humans had been captured illegally, so the High Command was willing to listen. Jake had 5 minutes to explain why they should not simply eliminate all humans and forget this incident. Jake took a breath. He thought about everything he had learned about the Krell. They valued strength. They respected warriors. They believed in honor, even if their definition was different from humanity's. He needed to speak their language. Not threaten, not beg. Something else. Jake started speaking. He said the Krell were right to be angry. His team had disrupted their ship, but they had done so because they were warriors. Real warriors did not accept slavery. They did not accept being used for entertainment. The Krell should understand this. They were warriors too. He said humanity had been isolated in their solar system. They did not know about the galactic community. They did not know about the Krell, but now they did. And Jake wanted to ask a question. What did the Krell gain from making enemies of Earth? The commanders looked at each other. One of them spoke. He said humans were primitive. They had basic technology, limited weapons, one small planet. They offered nothing the Krell needed. Jake nodded. He said that was true about technology. Humans were far behind, but they offered something else. Something the Krell military might value. Jake activated a data pad that Theron had given him. He pulled up files from Earth's military history, images of warfare spanning thousands of years, tactics, strategies, battles won through intelligence instead of strength. He showed them guerrilla warfare from human conflicts, special operations, asymmetric combat, ways of fighting that did not depend on having better weapons. He explained that humans had spent their entire existence fighting each other. Nation against nation, tribe against tribe. They had learned to win battles where they were outnumbered, where the enemy had better equipment, where victory seemed impossible. This knowledge, Jake said, was what humans could offer the Krell. The commanders were listening now. One of them asked why the Krell would need such tactics. They had superior technology. They had powerful fleets. Jake's response was careful but direct. He said every empire eventually faced threats, species that were strong or clever or desperate. The Krell could not always rely on technology. Sometimes adaptability mattered more than firepower. Jake showed them tactical simulations, human strategies applied to space combat, combined arms doctrine, coordination between different unit types, the use of terrain and environment as weapons, things that worked regardless of technology level. The commanders studied the displays. They were military leaders. They understood what they were seeing. One commander asked a hard question. Why should they trust humans? Why should they share technology with a species that might become enemies? Jake had expected this. He said trust had to be earned. He proposed a trial period. Human military advisors would work with Krell forces. No technology transfer yet. Just knowledge exchange. If it worked, they could discuss deeper cooperation. If it failed, the Krell could end the agreement. But Jake added one more thing. Something he had been thinking about since his capture. He said the galaxy was big, full of species they had never met. Some of those species might be dangerous. If the Krell and humans stood apart, they both faced risks. But together, combining human tactics with Krell technology, they would be stronger. They could build something new. An alliance based on mutual respect between warriors. The commanders were silent for a long moment. They spoke quietly among themselves, their words not translated. Jake waited. He had said everything he could, made the best argument possible. Now it was up to them. He glanced at Theron, who looked tense. Even the rebel guards seemed nervous. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Finally, the center commander spoke again. He said the High Command would consider the proposal. But there were conditions. First, Commander Vex would face tribunal for violating protocols. Second, all human prisoners would be released and given medical care. Third, Jake and his team would remain as guests, not prisoners, while the trial period was arranged. Fourth, if any human broke the agreement, there would be consequences. Jake agreed immediately. Those were fair terms, better than he had hoped for. The commander continued. He said Jake would serve as the first human liaison to the Krell Military Academy. He would teach Krell officers about human tactics. In exchange, Jake would learn about Krell operations and galactic politics. It would be a true exchange of knowledge. The commander paused, then asked one final question. The intelligence report said Jake was called Reaper by his enemies. Was this true? Jake nodded. The commander asked what the name meant. Jake thought carefully before answering. He said it meant he completed missions that others could not. It meant he survived when survival seemed impossible. It meant he did what was necessary to protect his people. The commander seemed satisfied with this answer. He said the Krell had a similar concept. Warriors who transcended normal limitations, who became legends. The Krell called them Deathwalkers. It was a title of respect. If Jake was truly a Reaper, then perhaps this alliance could work. Perhaps humans and Krell could learn from each other. The holographic display ended. The command deck erupted in activity as officers began implementing the High Command's orders. Theron approached Jake and extended one of his hands in a gesture that might have been their version of a handshake. He said Jake had done something remarkable. He had turned a disaster into an opportunity. Not many beings could do that. Jake shook his hand. He said he just did what any good soldier would do. Adapt to the situation. Find a way forward. Theron made a sound that might have been laughter. He said most soldiers would have either fought to the death or surrendered. Jake had done neither. He had created a third option. That was what made him special. Lisa, Carlos, and Ben arrived on the command deck, escorted by the rebel guards. They looked tired but relieved. Lisa asked Jake if it was really over. Were they actually free? Jake nodded. It was over. They had won. Not the way they expected, but they had won. Carlos laughed and said only Jake could get captured by aliens and turn it into a job opportunity. Ben added that this would make one hell of a mission report. Lisa just shook her head. She said she knew Jake would find a way. He always did. Over the next week, things moved quickly. The Horizon Explorer was repaired. 6 months had passed since the capture. Jake stood in front of 200 Krell officer candidates at the military academy. They were young, eager, and curious. Most had only heard stories about the human called Reaper. Now they were seeing him in person. Some looked skeptical. A human teaching Krell warriors? Others looked interested. They had heard what happened in the arena. They wanted to learn. Jake started his lesson simply. He asked them a question. What was the most important factor in warfare? Technology? Numbers? Firepower? The candidates shouted answers. All confident. All certain they knew. Jake listened and nodded. Then he showed them they were wrong. He pulled up a tactical simulation on the holographic display. A small force defending against a much larger army. The small force had inferior weapons and no defensive positions. By every measure, they should lose quickly. But Jake showed them how the small force could win. Using terrain. Using psychology. Using the enemy's assumptions against them. Making the enemy fight where they were weakest instead of where they were strong. The candidates were quiet now. Watching. Learning. Jake told them about human military history. About battles where outnumbered forces won through cleverness. About warriors who refused to fight fair because fair meant death. About the importance of adaptation. Of thinking instead of just reacting. One candidate raised a hand. She asked if Jake was saying Krell warriors were too dependent on technology, that they did not think enough. It was a challenging question. Jake could see other instructors watching nervously. But Jake smiled. He said that was exactly what he was saying. The Krell were excellent warriors. But they had grown comfortable. They assumed superior technology meant victory. That assumption was dangerous. He told them about Earth. How humans had no natural weapons. No armor, no poison. They were weak compared to many predators. But they survived. They thrived because they learned to use their minds. They made tools. They worked together. They adapted to any environment. That was the lesson. Not that technology was bad, but that thinking was more important than equipment. The months at the academy were challenging but rewarding. Jake taught classes on tactics, on leadership, on the psychology of combat. The candidates were skeptical at first, but slowly they started to see results. Training exercises that used human tactics showed improvement. Krell forces became more flexible, more creative. They stopped relying only on firepower and started using strategy. In return, Jake learned about the Krell, about their honor codes, their clan structures, their view of the galaxy. He learned about other species. Some were peaceful traders. Some were aggressive expansionists. Some were mysteries that no one understood. The galaxy was more complex than Earth had imagined. More dangerous. More wonderful. Corvin became Jake's close friend and translator for cultural issues. He helped Jake understand Krell customs that seemed strange, why they valued certain things, what insults to avoid, how to read their body language. In turn, Jake taught Corvin about humans, about Earth's diversity, about human hopes and fears, about why Earth needed allies. News from Earth was good. The human governments had voted to accept the alliance. A diplomatic mission was being prepared. Earth scientists were learning from Krell technology. Human military officers were being selected to train at the academy. The relationship was growing, becoming real. It was exactly what Jake had hoped for. But not everyone was happy. Some Krell still saw humans as inferior. Some humans feared the aliens. There were protests on Earth, demonstrations demanding that humanity reject the alliance. Fear was natural when facing the unknown. Change was always hard. But the alliance continued to grow because enough people on both sides saw the benefits. Then came the first joint military exercise. Human ships and Krell ships working together. Human tactics combined with Krell technology. It was a test. A way to show that the alliance was more than words. Jake was there as an observer and advisor. He watched with pride as human and Krell officers coordinated seamlessly. The exercise scenario was difficult. A hostage rescue on a hostile station. The defenders had superior numbers and strong fortifications. Traditional Krell tactics would result in heavy casualties, but using human special operations doctrine, The combined force succeeded with 0 losses. They used stealth, precision, timing, everything Jake had been teaching. The High Command was impressed. They sent a message to Jake. They acknowledged that the alliance was working, that human knowledge was valuable. They wanted to expand the program. More human instructors at the academy, more Krell officers training on Earth, deeper cooperation on technology and intelligence. The alliance was becoming real. Other species in the galaxy took notice. Some were curious about this new alliance. Some were concerned. Humans were unknown. The Krell were powerful. Together they represented a shift in galactic politics. Diplomatic channels opened. Trade negotiations began. Humanity was no longer isolated. They were players in a much larger game. One evening, Jake received a communication from Earth. It was from his old commanding officer. The message was brief. The Admiral said Jake had done something remarkable. He had turned a failed mission into humanity's first galactic alliance. He had represented Earth with honor and skill. The Admiral said Jake could come home whenever he wanted. His mission was complete. He had earned his rest. Jake thought about it. Going home, seeing Earth again, being with his own people, it was tempting. But there was more work to do. The alliance was young, fragile. It needed people who understood both sides, people who could bridge the gap between species, people who believed that cooperation was better than conflict. Jake sent his reply. He thanked the Admiral but said he would stay, at least for now. There were more officers to train, more lessons to teach, more bridges to build. This was his mission now, not the mission he expected, but the one he needed to complete. Lisa, Carlos, and Ben visited him at the academy. They had been promoted and were leading the Earth contingent of human instructors. They brought news from home, stories about people, places, things Jake missed. But they also brought something else, pride. They told Jake that Earth was changing, opening up, looking to the stars with hope instead of fear, and it was because of what he started. Carlos joked that Jake had gone from classified operator to famous diplomat, that the name Reaper was being replaced by other names, ambassador, teacher, friend. Jake laughed and said he preferred being anonymous. Fame was uncomfortable, but Carlos pointed out that sometimes fame was useful, that having a human the Krell respected helped the alliance, that being the bridge between species was important work. Ben said something Jake had been thinking about. He said the Krell captured a SEAL team expecting to get prisoners. Instead, they got the start of an alliance. They thought they caught prey. They actually caught the future. Because when humans and Krell worked together, they were stronger than either species alone. That was the real lesson. That was what mattered. Lisa added that people on Earth were calling Jake a hero. He had prevented a war. He had opened the galaxy to humanity. He had shown that humans could stand alongside advanced species as equals. Jake said he was just a soldier doing his job, but Lisa shook her head. She said what Jake did was more than following orders. He created something new, something that would last long after they were all gone. Later, Jake stood on an observation platform overlooking the academy training grounds. Krell and human officers trained together, learning from each other, building friendships across species. It was something beautiful, something that seemed impossible 6 months ago, but it was real. Growing stronger every day, Kragor approached. The former arena champion had become one of Jake's strongest supporters. He taught classes on Krell combat styles while Jake taught human tactics. Together, they showed that different approaches could complement each other. That strength came in many forms. Kragor said he wanted to tell Jake something. 6 months ago, he thought losing to a human was the worst thing that could happen. It destroyed his reputation, his pride, everything he had built. But now he understood it was the best thing. It taught him humility, showed him that strength was not just physical, that being defeated by a better warrior was not shame. It was a lesson. Jake said Kragor was a good warrior and an even better teacher, that it took strength to learn from defeat, to change, to grow. Kragor made a sound that might have been agreement. He said Jake had changed the Krell military, made them think differently, fight smarter, and maybe, just maybe, become better warriors because of it. As they watched the training grounds, a new class of candidates arrived. These were different from the first group. They came expecting to learn from the human instructor. They were eager, respectful. They knew the stories about the capture, the arena, the alliance. But they also knew that Jake was more than stories. He was proof that different species could work together, could learn from each other, could build something better than either could alone. One young candidate approached Jake nervously. She asked if the stories were true. Had he really defeated Kragor with no weapons? Jake smiled and said the stories were exaggerated. He had been lucky, well-trained, desperate but mostly lucky. The candidate looked disappointed. She said she wanted to believe the stories.